Lieutenant Sarah Chun had always been told she was too small for the Navy. At 5 feet 4 inches and barely meeting the weight requirements, she faced constant doubt from instructors and fellow recruits. But what Sarah lacked in size, she made up for in determination and an almost supernatural ability to hold her breath underwater. Growing up in a small fishing village in Maine, Sarah spent most of her childhood diving for sea urchins and lobsters with her grandfather. The icy Atlantic waters that made other kids gasp and scramble for shore felt like home to her. Her grandfather, a former pearl diver, taught her ancient breathing techniques passed down through generations of his Korean family. When Sarah announced she wanted to become a Navy diver, her parents thought she was joking. Women had only recently been allowed into combat diving roles, and the physical demands were legendary. The training had a dropout rate of nearly 70%, even among the strongest male candidates. But Sarah had a secret weapon that nobody knew about. During her childhood diving expeditions, she had developed an unusual physiological adaptation. Her heart rate could slow to nearly half its normal speed underwater, and her body seemed to process oxygen more efficiently than most people. What took other divers tremendous effort felt natural to her. The Navy diving school in Panama City, Florida, was everything Sarah had heard and worse. Instructors screamed at candidates from dawn until dusk. The physical training pushed human limits, and the underwater exercises were designed to break even the most confident swimmers. Many quit within the first week. Sarah's first real test came during pool week, where candidates had to prove they could handle equipment failures underwater. The exercise was simple in concept, but terrifying in practice. Divers would go down 60 feet with full gear, then instructors would systematically sabotage their equipment. Masks would be ripped off, air hoses disconnected, and weights added to simulate emergency conditions. Most candidates panicked when their air supply was cut. The natural response was to bolt for the surface, which meant automatic failure. Sarah watched candidate after candidate fail this test. Strong men who could bench press twice their body weight, but couldn't control their fear when faced with drowning. When Sarah's turn came, her instructor, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, made it clear he expected her to fail. He had never trained a female diver and believed the program was no place for women. As Sarah descended to the bottom of the pool, she could see him signaling to the other instructors. They planned to make her test harder than anyone else's. The moment Sarah reached the bottom, Rodriguez dove down and yanked off her diving mask. Cold chlorinated water rushed in her nose and eyes. Before she could clear it, he disconnected her primary air supply. Then he grabbed her backup regulator and ripped it away too. In 30 seconds, Sarah went from having full life support to being completely cut off from air, with no vision, 60 feet underwater. This was where most candidates panicked. The human brain, when deprived of oxygen and faced with drowning, triggers an almost uncontrollable flight response. Every instinct screams to rush to the surface, but doing so meant failing the course and ending any dream of becoming a Navy diver. Sarah felt the familiar calm wash over her that she had known since childhood. Her heart rate dropped, and her body seemed to enter a different mode of operation. Instead of fighting the water or rushing for her emergency equipment, she methodically began the recovery procedures she had practiced hundreds of times. First, she recovered her mask, clearing it of water with practiced efficiency. Then, she located her primary regulator, purged it of water, and began breathing normally. The entire process took 2 minutes, but to the instructors watching from above, it seemed like she was moving in slow motion, completely unfazed by the emergency. Chief Rodriguez was not impressed. He decided to push harder. He swam down again, and this time removed all her weights, causing her to become dangerously buoyant. Then he tangled her air hoses and added extra weights to her belt. He was essentially creating a scenario where equipment failure could cause either rapid decompression or dangerous sinking. What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of struggling with the sabotaged equipment, Sarah simply removed all of it. She unbuckled her weight belt, disconnected her air supply, and dropped her tank. Then, she began swimming upward, using only the air in her lungs, performing a controlled emergency ascent from 60 feet. This was incredibly dangerous. Rising too quickly from that depth could cause decompression sickness or arterial gas embolism. But Sarah's years of free diving had taught her exactly how to manage her ascent rate and air expansion. She rose steadily, exhaling slowly to prevent lung overexpansion, and surfaced exactly 90 seconds later. The pool deck was completely silent. Even Chief Rodriguez was speechless. Sarah had just performed a textbook emergency ascent under conditions that would have killed most people. She had done it while remaining completely calm and following perfect safety protocols. But the instructors were not done testing her. That afternoon, they announced a special exercise. Sarah would have to repeat the morning's test, but this time she would be handcuffed underwater. The scenario was designed to simulate being trapped in a sunken vessel or having her hands injured during a diving emergency. As Sarah prepared for the exercise, she noticed something troubling. The other candidates were looking at her differently now. Some seemed impressed, but others appeared resentful. She could hear whispers about special treatment and questions about whether the standards were being lowered for her. The handcuff exercise was unlike anything in the standard curriculum. Sarah would be taken to the bottom of the pool, handcuffed behind her back, and then have all her equipment removed. She would need to surface using only her breath-holding ability and whatever techniques she could manage without the use of her hands. Chief Rodriguez personally escorted Sarah to the bottom of the pool. The handcuffs were standard police restraints, and once they were locked, she had no way to remove them. He then systematically removed her mask, regulator, and buoyancy vest. Finally, he removed her fins, leaving her weighted down at the bottom with no equipment and no use of her hands. The other candidates watched from the surface as Sarah sat motionless on the pool bottom. She appeared to be meditating, completely relaxed despite being in a situation that would cause most people to drown within minutes. Her breathing was so slow that barely any bubbles rose to the surface. What the observers couldn't see was the mental preparation Sarah was doing. She was slowing her heart rate and metabolism using techniques her grandfather had taught her. Her body was entering a state similar to what marine mammals experience during deep dives, where oxygen consumption drops dramatically and blood flow is redirected to essential organs. After what seemed like an eternity to those watching, Sarah began her ascent. Without the use of her hands, she had to rely entirely on body positioning and leg movements to propel herself upward. She moved with fluid, economical motions that wasted no energy and disturbed the water minimally. The ascent took nearly 4 minutes, an impossibly long time for someone holding their breath while exerting themselves underwater. When Sarah finally broke the surface, she was breathing normally and showed no signs of distress. The pool deck erupted in amazed chatter from the other candidates. Chief Rodriguez checked his stopwatch 3 times before believing it. Sarah had been underwater for over 7 minutes, including the time spent on the bottom and the slow ascent. Most trained divers couldn't hold their breath for 3 minutes while sitting still, let alone while performing complex maneuvers underwater. That evening, word of Sarah's performance spread throughout the base. She had done something that challenged everything the instructors thought they knew about human limitations underwater. But rather than celebrating, Sarah felt a growing sense of isolation from her fellow candidates. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Sarah was called to the office of Captain Williams, the commanding officer of the diving school. She had never been in trouble before and couldn't imagine what she had done wrong. Captain Williams was a veteran of 30 years in the Navy diving community. He had seen thousands of candidates come through the program and had trained some of the most elite underwater specialists in the military. When Sarah entered his office, he was reviewing footage from the previous day's exercises. The conversation that followed would change everything Sarah thought she knew about her future in the Navy. Captain Williams explained that her performance had attracted attention from some very high levels in the military. There were people in Washington who wanted to know more about her unusual abilities. But there was also concern. Some officials worried that Sarah's capabilities were so far beyond normal human limits that she might not be suitable for standard Navy diving operations. They questioned whether someone with her abilities should be in regular military service at all, or whether she belonged in more specialized programs that officially didn't exist. As Captain Williams spoke, Sarah realized that her childhood gift for diving might not be the advantage she thought it was. Instead of opening doors in the Navy, her abilities might be closing them. She was being faced with a choice that no other candidate had ever encountered. The meeting ended with an assignment that surprised Sarah completely. Instead of continuing with her regular training class, she was being transferred to a special evaluation program. She would spend the next month working with Navy researchers and physiologists to understand exactly what made her different from other divers. Sarah left Captain Williams' office with mixed feelings. She had wanted to prove herself as a Navy diver, but now she wasn't sure what she was becoming instead. That night, as she packed her gear for transfer to the research facility, she had no idea that her unusual abilities would soon be tested in ways that would make pool exercises seem like children's games. The research facility was located on a remote section of the base, in buildings that weren't marked on any official maps. Sarah's new quarters were comfortable but isolated, and she quickly realized that her movements were being monitored and recorded. Whatever this evaluation program was, it was far more serious than regular Navy training. Her new instructor was Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a naval physiologist who had spent years studying the limits of human performance in extreme environments. Dr. Morrison explained that Sarah would undergo a series of tests designed to map the full extent of her underwater capabilities. The first week of testing was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. She was connected to monitors that tracked everything from her brain waves to her cellular oxygen consumption. The researchers were particularly interested in what happened to her body when she entered what they called her dive state. During one test, Sarah was asked to hold her breath while connected to a device that measured her blood oxygen levels in real time. What the researchers found contradicted everything they knew about human physiology. While normal people's oxygen saturation drops steadily during breath holding, Sarah's levels seemed to stabilize at a point that should have caused unconsciousness. Dr. Morrison shared the results with growing excitement. Sarah's body appeared to be redistributing oxygen in a way that was previously thought impossible for humans. Her blood was carrying oxygen more efficiently, and her cells were consuming it more slowly than normal. It was as if evolution had given her gills that worked with lungs instead of replacing them. But the most shocking discovery came during the deep-water tests. Using specialized equipment, the researchers took Sarah to depths of over 200 feet in a controlled environment. At those depths, the pressure should have made it impossible for her to function normally without breathing equipment. Instead, Sarah seemed to thrive. Her heart rate remained steady, her movement stayed fluid, and she showed no signs of nitrogen narcosis or